All right, I'm Carolyn Hopkins here with Columbia Center for the Arts, and I am speaking with Jay Gaskill, who's one of the painters in our August show, Organic. And Jay lives in Portland, Oregon. I've been following his work for a few years, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to him. And Jay, if you could just tell us kind of your background, where you come from, how you got into painting, and what you're interested in your work.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been out here for almost 5 years now, but had grew up on the East Coast and spent all my time out there. So originally from Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. As a kid, I drew a lot. I remember really wanting to draw comics, like comic strips. Then eventually, wanted to do superhero comics, this sort of thing. And I was really lucky in that my parents were very encouraging of me. So all of my memories of summer are like going to different random art camps. Middle school and high school, I would be getting on the metro, going into DC and taking figure drawing classes at the Corcoran Museum on the weekends, those types of things. So, progressing to painting was just kind of like a natural thing as I was maturing as a person and as an artist, I think. And it just seemed the logical way to go. And by the time I was 16, I'd settled on like, I'm going to art school and I'm going to be a painter and this is that. And so I went to the School of Visual Arts. They had a summer program for high schoolers in between their junior and senior year. I did that, fell in love with the school, fell in love with the city. I mean, I already knew I was in love with the city, but it was an awesome experience. I still have friends from that time. We all wound up going to SVA the following year. And then 4 years at SVA. I was really fortunate after that to get a job in the arts, working for an artist as a studio assistant. And then I was basically off and running, stayed in New York City, moved to Brooklyn after graduation, kept painting, kept working, and then went back to school in 2009 to Hunter College to get my MFA. And those 3 years are really like another big step in the maturation process where, in my 20s, because that was about the time I was turning 29, 30. In my 20s, I was doing a pretty good job of like, coming home from work and making paintings and like doing stuff in the studio, putting in hours, but I wasn't putting in brain hours. And going to Hunter and getting my MFA really taught me how to take that up another level. And since then, I think my work is just gotten a lot better. I'm a lot happier with it, and I can more easily see the growth. Whereas like a painting from 2002 to 2007 is kind of like indistinguishable. But now when I see something I made in 2016, I'm like, wow, who was that person? So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And just from kind of knowing you a little bit personally and observing your practice, I know that you're someone who does paint quite a bit and that you are very process oriented in terms of being in studio and making. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about that process and how you approach a work and how, those hours in studios function for you in terms of making one piece that moves into a body of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my method in the studio is a little bit atypical. Usually when I have other artists over and they see how I work, they're pretty surprised. I do a lot of prep work before I ever even touch canvas. So everything will start with just like a little line drawing, and then I'll project that up and then I'll paint it on it. I'll paint that line drawing out into an image using acetate. So for those who don't know, acetate is just a really heavy, clear plastic. And so I do a lot of studies with that where I'm really figuring out the colors, figuring out the shapes and how the piece is going to go. And I like to work on several pieces at once so I can stay fresh with each one. I might spend one studio day on one, put it away and not look at it for 3 weeks, and kind of, so that way when I'm making a group of 4 or 5 paintings, I'm able to, they just naturally inform each other. I don't even have to think about it so much, because the decisions I'm making on this Friday will inform the decisions I'm making on a future Saturday on a different painting. So over the last couple of years, I've been able to really hone that in, and I'll get like 5 paintings at a time that all kind of fit together. And then what I've recently been doing is I also make works on paper. So I use UFO paper, which is also a plastic-based paper. And I'll use the same paints from the paintings in the works on paper. So then those start feeding back in on itself, because it's all sort of like a similar color story. And the imagery itself also folds back in on itself.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think also from reading your artist statement, I know, you know, you're an abstract painter, and when you see your work up close, there's a lot of different mark making happening, and there's a lot of subtlety in the work that you can see in digital form, but I think seeing the work in person allows the viewer to really delve into that. And I'm just wondering, you know, when you go into studio, where are you pulling those forms from? And are they kind of speaking about a larger subject matter to you? And if you can kind of elaborate about the content of the work.
Absolutely. So it's semi-conscious and also completely unconscious the way that that happens. And there's been a huge shift in my work since I moved to Oregon from the East Coast. The forms have gotten much more natural. I remember the first time I came out here just being like, oh, there's so many trees. And I used to joke with people before I moved, like, oh, I'm going where there are trees. And they're like, we have trees here. And I'm like, you haven't been to Oregon. And then I feel like 2 years after moving here, all of a sudden I'm like making abstract paintings of trees. So there's a lot of sort of like the leaf patterns, that sort of thing, just taking walks around my neighborhood, you know, going out to Mount Hood or going to Trillium Lake or something like that. All of that starts informing it, both consciously and unconsciously. In terms of the mark making, I was really, previously when I was in New York, I was making very graphic, flat paintings. And I wanted to tell more of a story of change in the work and impermanence as I was which is how I was feeling moving out here to a new coast where I didn't really know anybody, but also felt like we as a society over the last 4 years may have had some changes. Things are switching around. People are reevaluating the way that they view the world. And I'm really trying to put that content in there as well, with the brush strokes and the way the colors interact, the vibrations, the way that you may not realize that 2 colors that are sitting next to each other and look almost the same are actually very different once you really get in there. So those are some of the things I kind of think about and try to put into these nominally abstract, non-representational, non-objective paintings, but there's a lot there.
Yeah, I'm also really curious, and I don't even think I've ever asked you this. What artists do you look at, and who do you feel like has informed your practice over time? And is there anyone in particular right now that you're following and paying attention to?
Sure, absolutely. I'd say early on as an artist, my elevator pitch to people would be that I was trying to combine John Wesley with Bryce Martin. So those are sort of like the very early ideas, and those are still in there. But I would say that if we were going to use 2 artists that I'm combining now in that same sort of rubric, which obviously, there's limitations to it, but it would be more Bridget Riley and Chris O'Feely. Some other artists I think about are like Kelty Ferris, her abstractions, seeing those in New York. She was starting to really show a lot before I left. Really informed the way that I think about layers of coloring. Also, Michael Berryhill, he's another painter who does these sort of quasi-representational abstractions. And I was jealous of the way that he was able to he uses oil paint, does different things, but the way that he was able to layer colors and put more stuff in there. So those are just a few.
I'm gonna have to look some of those up for sure. So I know that you have some other projects that you're pretty invested in, and I would love to give you an opportunity to kind of delve into those. I was wondering if you could tell everyone about the drawing exchange and how that functions for you, and then also, you know, how you came about starting that project.
Absolutely. So the drawing exchange came out of a conversation I had with an old Hunter classmate in the fall of 2016. You know, it was like 9-ish months, 12 months after moving here. And we were talking about, I was feeling a little bit isolated, new place, work from home, day job, studio in my house. We're talking about all the normal things somebody could do. You know, like, oh, start a podcast, make a gallery in your home office, these kinds of ideas. And he used to play in a punk band, like a hardcore band. And he said, like, oh, you should make like a mixtape trading site, but for drawings. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. But that idea kind of stuck in my head for another 9 months. And then in July of 2017, I woke up one morning, and I can still remember that morning, and lying there in bed, the drawing exchange came to me almost completely fully formed. And so what it is it's an exchange of work, of drawings between artists from all around the country, and now from several other countries have participated. But it's not like a one-to-one trade where Jay and Carolyn are trading pieces. It's more everybody's putting pieces into a general pool, the exchange, and then people are withdrawing them. And each time we have an exchange, there might be slightly different rules of engagement for that. I might post several works throughout the course of a day at specific times. Whoever requests it first gets it. Some other times I might do 50 pieces in a single day, and everything's available all at once. So just different ways to kind of keep it engaged. So it's kind of like a trading, but it's also a little bit of a game. It's also just like a sort of like a social media obsession. People set alarms so they can get the good drawings. It gets really intense. And then it's been awesome because I've been able to connect with so many other artists just through Instagram, not only, and I've made friends here in Portland from people I met on Instagram doing this, which has been amazing, and friends all across the country now at this point. Most recently, our most recent exchange after the coronavirus hit and everybody was at home, and so many artists are so vulnerable and economically because so many of us work in the service industry, or, you know, they're like art handlers, all their jobs were gone. So I hosted the first exchange that was open to the public and was actually a sale. So we had, I think, over 50 artists participate over 2 weeks, and we were posting a ton of drawings, and we raised over $13,000 that went right into artists' pockets. So yeah, and now I'm trying to figure out when the next exchange is going to be, but it's been a really important part of my artistic life for the last several years.
Yeah,
because I also feel like engaging with the community, it just should be part of your job as an artist. You can't just sit in your home by yourself. You need to be in dialogue with other people and uplift other people as well.
Right. I love that adaptation of it, considering everything that's going on right now. I think a lot of people, you know, having to kind of rethink the way we approach all of these things, and certainly CCA has been going online a lot more, and we're kind of trying to figure out how we can help artists and draw people into what we're doing who can't come into the space. So it's definitely something that seems to be kind of affecting all of us really rapidly. And so the last thing I would like for you to talk about is your other project, Air and Space.
Yeah, totally. So Air and Space was started about a year ago now. The drawing exchange had kind of given me, it's been so satisfying to work with other artists, but I wanted to do something even more. So, first thought is always like, oh, start a gallery. But monetarily, it's just so much work. You've started galleries. It's so much work monetarily, time-wise, emotional labor, all of this. And I didn't have enough of that to go around. So sort of doubling down on the drawing exchange experience, I was like, I'm on Instagram. Everybody's on Instagram. But most artists and galleries just sort of use Instagram to point to things in real life. I have a show. Like, look at this artist talk we're doing, look at these installation views. So, but nobody's actually doing anything on Instagram for that platform. So I was thinking about that, and I was listening to a lot of house and techno music, and so many of these DJs and artists in the electronic music scene, they all have their own record labels. I'm like, what if every artist could have their own record label where they're putting out work by their friends, by their peers, people they admire? So I started thinking about the obvious analogy of like Spotify as Instagram. So a record label on Spotify could be like a record label on Instagram, but for painting, so a painting label. So I started Aaron Space, and I've been collaborating with my wife, who's a designer. She does the quote unquote record labels for each release. So we'll drop, usually 3 to 5 pieces by someone, pieces that have never been on Instagram, tie them together and put them out that way. And it's been really great. We're about to have our 12th release next week by an artist from Northeastern Pennsylvania. And yeah, it's been super fun.
Yeah, it's a really fun one to follow. And can you give everyone the Instagram handle for that?
Yeah, of course. It's airinspace.art.
Perfect. And then I just want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can see your work, what your website is, and social media handles if they want to follow you.
Yeah, totally. My Instagram handle is @PatientGlacier. And the Drawing Exchange is @TheDrawingExchangeArchive. There is an @TheDrawingExchange, but that's a private account, and that's the one where the actual exchange happens. So that's only for people who are participating. But the archive account reposts everything. Right now, I'm actually reposting the exchange that we did on New Year's Day of this year, which feels like a completely different universe at this point.
Yeah.
And my website is jgaskill.us.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking time to speak with me. We're really excited to have your work here. And you'll be at the opening?
Yes, yeah.
So people can feel free to come meet you in person on August 7th from 6 to 9 p.m.
I would love that. Thanks so much, Carolyn. Can't wait.